notes shouldn't be too lengthy. We'll take care of that these sessions are completed within time. We'll take care of that. Difficulty in logging in? Yes, there are network issues with climate changes also. So we are all trying to bear it with. So that was all for the feedback for day 1 and 2. And now, without wasting much of time, we move on to our speakers. Our speaker, the first speaker for the day, Dr. Ashi Chugh. Please, Dr. Ashi, you may take over.
A very good evening to all participants for day 3. It's a warm welcome for all of you from our side. The topic that I've been assigned today is ethics responsibility for peer reviewers. I'm Dr. Ashi Chugh, additional professor at AIIMS Rishikesh. So I'll be running through the contents. What is a peer review? What do researchers want as authors and readers from reviewers? What does the term fair treatment of authors mean? What do the points on which the reviewer needs to look at? What is the role of trust in a peer review? What are the do's and don'ts that a reviewer needs to do? How would you detect any misconduct? And what are the penalties for authors who indulge in misconduct? And finally, I'll be concluding my session. So what is a peer review? A peer review has been defined as a process of subjecting an author's scholarly work, research, or ideas to the scrutiny of others who are experts in the same field. So basically, for all those who've joined in today and who were not there yesterday or day before, so you can see this person in purple who's presenting a manuscript, who's submitted it for a peer review. There are 2 peer reviews in yellow, in red and blue, and the yellow is the editor. So they all combine together, they form a team, and then they review the article and they accept or reject the manuscript. So the question which is asked are, what is the tips which are used, or what makes a high quality peer review? So, well, the desire to review the paper rather than feeling obliged.
Ashi has gone.
It's some network lag.
To do so, it should. Yeah. Reviewing requires a lot of patience, and some reviewers don't just want to put effort. So, hello, am I audible now? Hello.
You are leaving in between. Go ahead.
So basically, the peer review process, it starts, for example, a scientist who performs experiments and writes them up as an article. And then this article is sent to the editor of an appropriate journal for consideration. And the editor decides whether to send the article for peer review or to reject it right away. After the rejection, the author can submit the paper to a different journal. The scientist then reviews the article critically, asks the author for clarification, additional analysis, or experiments. They recommend rejection or acceptance. Based on the review's comments, the editor then decides whether to accept or reject the manuscript or ask the author to respond to review's comments. And this paper can go through several steps through the steps 2, 3, 4, 5 before for several times before it comes to a conclusion whether it should be accepted or rejected for publication. So the best reviewers should consider themselves as teachers and mentors rather than critics or trying to look down upon the article which has been submitted to them. They should take it up more like a responsibility which has been entrusted in them, because a lot of hard work has gone into the manuscript. So it is more of a responsibility. It is more of something which you should take as a mentoring job, that a lot of hard work has been put in, so you should do justice to whatever has been put to you. So as in life, what you do, so shall you reap. What goes around comes around. So treat all manuscripts as you'd like your manuscripts to be treated by other reviewers. So the way that you treat other manuscripts is the same way that you would want your manuscripts to be treated by other reviewers. So what do researchers want as authors and readers as reviewers? So basically, authors want to show some kind of ownership. They want to have a certification or a quality stamp of the work that they're trying to do. Also, readers are looking at certification, getting noticed, having accessibility to data, easily navigate through data. So the authors are looking at fair treatment of their review articles, and the readers are looking at trustworthy articles which they can follow and which they can use in their clinical practice. So basically, researchers, the authors want fair treatment, as in they want their manuscripts to be judged fairly and wisely and ethically by the reviewers, and the readers want a good quality of science or good quality of literature which is out for which is a trustworthy article which can be dependent upon. So fair treatment of authors, the peer review process. Now, the points at which the reviewer needs to look at is the originality of the work. How original is the data? How original is the manuscript? What is the importance? What is the relevance in the clinical scenario or in the day-to-day scenario or in whatever field the person is presenting the work? How clear are the concepts? What is the clarity of the manuscript? They also need to the reviewer also needs to assess the strengths and weaknesses, the introduction, the methodology, the data analysis, results, discussion, conclusion. Each and every part should be given enough time and enough weightage and should be studied section wise to provide a good review of the manuscript. Internal consistency of the manuscript needs to be studied. The writing style, whether the flow is good, whether it's all interconnected, whether the figure and table presentation, whether it is appropriate to the journal's requirements of the title, the abstracts, the conclusion references, the format is proper or not. So all those things are needed. So what is the most important part of a peer review is that it is totally based on trust. The peer review process, which in a sense determines what becomes the public record of science, is based on nothing but trust. This trust is between the authors and the editors. So the author submits his manuscript, his hard work to an editor in complete trust. And the editor in turn trusts the reviewers for reviewing that manuscript and then giving back a report on what should be done about that. How reliable the person is, how reviewing, how sincere he is with his reviewing, what is his commitment to the review process, how what kind of integrity and competence he is showing towards the process. So this all involves the trust here, which is a basic importance of the peer review. What is important is that the manuscript is an extremely confidential document, and it should be kept as so. You should not be discussing it with others over a WhatsApp chat, or you cannot just have a conversation. That the content is also the property of the authors. It is completely the property of the authors. You cannot use any part of that content or distribute it. And the reason is because it may be used by others who might be doing some kind of similar research. Sometimes, as the eminent speaker yesterday said, Sachin sir said that print copies are taken out by most of us for reviewing. So make sure that it is not left upon unattended on your desk. Do not share it. Keep it confidential until the review process is complete. Keep it safe till the review process is completed, till the editor has come to a decision. And when the editor has come to a decision, then you make sure that you destroy the print copies of the manuscript because it may be misused. So the shared responsibility of a review, sometimes what happens is that a senior reviewer may need help to review the article. So he asks his junior colleague or he asks someone else to review the article who is known to him. In this case, what you need to do is you need to take permission from the editor, and you also need to mention that person's name and affiliation while reviewing the manuscript, so that it becomes you give due credit to the second person who's reviewing the article, and it should be also you should not talk about it to the others, so that otherwise this would become viral. It just becomes a free floating document. Oh, this guy is trying to do this kind of research. No, you should maintain confidentiality on all counts. So you should always maintain the spirit of the peer review. Do not share the data. Keep it absolutely confidential. Do not use the idea. You should respect that the idea is of the authors. So you should respect that. Provide an honest and critical assessment without being sarcastic, without trying to be egoistic, or without looking down upon that manuscript. It should be a very fair review. Avoid conflict of interest. Help the editor. Avoid conflict of interest is like, suppose you have one of the authors has his own manufacturing firm, and that whole manuscript is trying to review how well that machinery is working. So that can be used in the long run to as an article to promote sales for that product. Or if there is some kind of a research which you are very closely related with, and reviewing that article may or may not try and influence your project. Like, suppose if I'm doing a project on a similar topic, and I'm given a project to review or a manuscript to review which is very similar, and if I am inclined to change my data based on that study, then I should not accept that. You should also help the editor reach to a decision on the paper. So the main reason why we reviewers are given a paper to review is that we help or support the editor in reaching decision. So this was also discussed yesterday, that the reviewer recommends, but the editor is the final person who decides. And also the review report that you write for the authors should be in line with that of the what's written for the editor. You cannot give contradictory reviews for the authors, and then you say no to the authors and you say yes to the editors. So both of them should be consistent and be in line with each other. Another thing that you need to mention to remember is you should accept only those articles which are in your area of expertise and which you can complete your review on time. So always identify your areas of expertise and don't try and review something which you don't know much of. Be very humble and tell them that no, probably you should choose someone else who's more appropriate to do this job. And uh, complete your reviews on time. This is something which most of us tend to we don't finish our reviews on time. The reason is that a lot of time and effort goes into reviewing these articles. So you need to actually devote. There are peer review articles which say that you need to devote at least 4 hours of your precious time over a period of 2 days or 3 weeks. So basically, you need to have that much of time. You need to have at least 4 hours within a period of 3 to 4 weeks, or 2 to 3 weeks, or to finish that review. So it's not that you finish it within half an hour or so. You have to study each and every aspect of the review of the manuscript. So that takes time. So make sure that you have enough time before you accept any article for a review process. Now, the other question is, if you want to directly communicate with the author, should you do that or not? Well, the straightforward answer is no. The only medium of communication for a reviewer is through the editor. So you get in touch with the editor, then the editor gets in touch with the authors, or the editor uses his or her discretion on what to do and what not to do. You do not break the chain. Like we have a protocol, we have a hierarchy, or whatever you call it. We do not break the chain. We do not communicate with the authors because reviewers remain anonymous, and that keeps the integrity of the entire review process intact. Detection of misconduct. So how would you detect any kind of misconduct? Reviewers are not asked to detect plagiarism. We had discussed this yesterday, because whenever an article for review is submitted to you, a flag check is already done on it. That's what Divya ma'am had informed us yesterday. We learned that yesterday. So we're not here to detect any kind of fraud or any kind of misconduct or any ethics-based issues, because ideally ethics is the sole responsibility of the author. So we rely on the author for his ingrained or inbuilt mechanism to be ethical and to provide us a manuscript which is ethically sound and which has the highest standards of science and research. So the two forms of misconduct are publication misconduct and scientific misconduct. So the publication misconduct is something like this, in which the researchers tend to draw line, point A to point B, point C to point D, and while fabricating this entire story, they come up with a monster, which is actually what they've just fabricated something which might just gobble them up, or which is looking at them, that this is not what should be done. So publication misconduct includes plagiarism, which basically is the appropriation of another person's ideas, processes, which results or processes, results, or words without giving appropriate credit. So basically, it means plagiarism means that you're stealing someone's idea or you're stealing someone's work. You're just lifting whatever the work of someone and you're putting it as your work. So that is plagiarism, and that is something equivalent to stealing. A duplicate publication is something that you've published it once and you're publishing it in another journal again. So that should be avoided. That is not done. Once you published it in one journal, it should remain there. A duplicate submission is that you are trying to duplicate your submissions again and again. That should also be avoided. Appropriate acknowledgement of prior research and researchers should be done. You should not forget the role of each and every person in the research team or who has actively contributed to the data and the research project. So all of them should be acknowledged, and appropriate identification of all co-authors is an absolute essential must. Also, the conflict of interest needs to be addressed, and if there is any conflict of interest, it should be mentioned, as I've already mentioned before. So if there is any scientific misconduct, it is the role of the reviewer to raise a red flag. So if there's any kind of research scientific misconduct, the reviewer has to raise a red flag. And basically, scientific misconduct includes fabrication, which means making up of research data. So basically, the researcher is lying and is making up data or results and recording or reporting it as theirs. So that is like you're fabricating the data. Falsification is manipulation of the existing data. So it is basically cheating. So you're basically manipulating research materials, equipment, or processes, or changing or omitting data or results that the research is not accurately presented in the research record. And another kind of scientific misconduct includes improper use of humans or animals in research. So if you look at the ideal bar of research practices from left to right, on the left of the screen, you can see the gold standard, which is mentioned in green. So the data is open for everyone. It's an open code. All the data sets are available for review. Then comes to the middle gray area, which involves P's, hacking, copy statistics, and peer review abuse, inappropriate research design, not answering to the replicators, and lying about authorships. And then you come to the darker shade of the gray on moving more towards the right, where is the data secrecy part, where you tend to intentionally hide, or you intentionally try to hide some data which is very relevant, but you're trying to hide it and you're not opening it up for a good review. So then comes to the red end, which is the extreme end of the ideal bar, which is scientific misconduct, which includes fabrication, falsification, and plagiarism, which we've already mentioned. So what do reviewers need to maintain? You need to maintain a high integrity, professional integrity, and a high degree of honesty. So the research integrity should include the use of honest and verifiable methods in proposing, performing, and evaluating research. And if we come to what are the penalties for authors who indulge in misconduct, suppose someone has actually tried to done a misconduct on purpose, or it just happens by chance. So this is the initial level. So in initial levels, mistakes happen. Each one of us, we're all human beings, we do mistakes. So you request the journal's editor that, okay, we have a publication which was published, but now we've realized that this aspect was not right, so we would want to publish a corrigendum, or we would like to modify the data. So basically that journal stays where it is, but a corrigendum is published in addition to that in the next review, in the next article. And that is like, for example, in this, this is an engineering corrigendum to double cooling coil model for non-linear HVAC systems, in which they mentioned that the authors regret that when the above paper was published, the equation 2 was incorrect. So they have corrected the equation and then they've mentioned it again. So the article stays where it is, but this is just that an additional corrigendum is placed so that the changes can be made. Now there's another one example here by basically, so the authors regret that the equation which was published was wrong. So now they have changed the equation and they wanted a corrigendum to be launched, to be issued. Here's one in which it's a corrigendum to endobronchial ultrasonography, and the authors regret that they had missed to include the name of a co-author. So they've totally forgot about Mr. Mahmood and El-Feki, who was a co-author, and now they apologize and they wish that his name is put in as a co-author. So another example is that it's a journal of experimental social psychology, and the authors regret to inform that on page 135 incorrectly states that in the 14 days of follow-ups after baseline, participants assigned to the intervention group completed a short description. So basically the methodology was different, and they apologize and they're trying to put that in. So if you go a high level higher, what are the penalties for the authors who indulge in misconduct? So the journal can publish a note of concern. A note of concern can be issued to the author, and that can be given by the journal. If you go a level higher, then the journal might have to retract the article from literature. So basically, the article is retracted if the kind of misconduct or the kind of flaws are more. Also, if another way of naming and shaming such authors who have performed a gross misconduct, or they've done gross plagiarism, they've lifted up complete data sets and it's completely unethical. So then such journals tend to post on their website that so and so author has lifted up this particular journal or this particular article from here, and that post remains online forever. So that's like a public name and shame for that particular researcher for the rest of his life. Because whenever you type his name, that article comes up and it comes as a name and shame. So that is something which is done for the reviewers. Then another thing is to put a watermark banner on the article and to mention that it is retracted. So this is how it is done. So this shows to someone, if it is out in literature, it shows that it's been retracted. So this is not a valid field of science, or it's not a good report to rely on. Another way is to contact the universities of the particular reviewer and to ask them to review their ethics policies. You can ask the universities to review their ethics policies and to revise them again, because if the institutional ethical clearance has cleared that particular research project, so there is something wrong with the review project, with the ethics and the review project as such. In fact, in December last year, end of December last year, the University Grants Commission has made classes mandatory on ethics, misconduct of publications for PhD students. So basically, this is something which will be replicated for undergraduate students as well. And there'll be classes which are going to be on ethics and misconduct of publications, so that from a very early developing age, these students and these kids get accustomed to what is actually required from them as researchers and as reviewers, which is what are the ethical principles that they should know. If you go higher, the other thing is to blacklist the author for some time to publish in that particular journal. So if the degree of the plagiarism or the degree of the lying or the fabrication or falsification keeps on increasing, then it's up to the editor to blacklist that particular author. An interesting article which was on the talk, which was on the news, which was on the guidelines all over the world, which was released on May 22nd, which is a study from Harvard Medical School by Desai and by Sapan Desai et al., in which they've studied the multinational registry analysis of hydroxychloroquine with or without a macrolide. So this was in the news for all the wrong reasons. The Lancet, as we all know, is a very, very respected journal. It's got one of the best, it's got the highest impact factors, and along with Nature, Lancet is one of the most respected journals. But however, this was the article which was published by Desai et al. From the Bingham School, which is a part of the Harvard Medical School, in which they had done a registry of data of 671 hospitals. Imagine 671 hospitals in 6 continents. And it was a study over a period of 5 months in which they did an extensive study, and they had multiple data sets, and it was a huge study. But just 2 weeks later, so if you look at the date here, it's June 4th, they have retracted this article. Now this article was in the news. It was forming the guidelines of most of the authorities of most of the World Health Organizations, and even Americans were going gaga about it, that we have to follow this or we don't have to follow it. So it was a trend-setting article. But within 2 weeks, this article was retracted, and the reason was that Sapan Desai had was owning a corporation called Surgifair Corporation, and they had launched an independent third-party peer review of Surgisphere. So a third-party peer review did a review of all this data, and they requested Sapan Desai, who owned Surgisphere, to give them the data sets, the full data sets, the client contracts, and the reports, the auditing reports, so that they can check for the confidentiality requirements. And they were not given that, and they were not allowed to do an independent and private peer review. Due to that, these authors had to withdraw the article. So this is a fine example of how an independent third-party peer review has withdrawn this article from a very prominent journal. And this is just recent. It's June 4th, so we're hardly a few. That was like yesterday. It's retracted. So reviewing is a very responsible job, and you should take it up very seriously, because whatever you review, the science that comes out of it is it tends to have very much should the review should form on science. It should be based on your scientific principles. So to conclude, the review of manuscripts for peer-reviewed journals raises many ethical issues and problems. The reviewer must be aware when deciding to review a paper, throughout the review process, and even after the review has been submitted. Some forethought and planning will enable the reviewer to avoid some potential problems. But when in doubt, the pillars of respect, ethics, integrity, and honesty should be intact. And the reviewer may discuss all these concerns which he has with the editor or the journal staff. The reviewer should strive to provide reviews that meet the highest standards of ethics as well as the highest standards of science. I would like you to go through the COPE ethical guidelines. So these are the ethical guidelines. If there's any take-home message from this talk, you should all go back and download the COPE guidelines, which is the COPE stands for Committee on Publication Ethics, and these are guidelines, ethical guidelines for peer reviewers. So this is summarizing the entire talk which we had today, and I think if you go through that, if you want a copy of that, I can mail it to you, or we can put it on the group as well. And thank you for your patient hearing, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ashi. So let's have a small question answer session. So we have a few questions for you. One of the participants has asked, what about quoting some important lines from some other article? If we give credits, then is it called plagiarism? You'll take this?
Yeah, the thing is, if you are quoting word to word, the thing is, your article should not have more than 10% plagiarism. So if you are quoting word to word, you should make sure that not more than 1/10 of the article is taken as that. But you are not supposed to quote for word to word. You should not lift up, whether it is 5 words or 5 lines or 5 pages or 5 chapters. It doesn't matter. But lifting up is not allowed.
Can I say something? It has to be in inverted commas if you're taking somewhere and copying it here. So if you're putting it in under inverted commas, you can do that. But that can be done for names or for definitions. That's it. Otherwise, you have to reframe it and put it in your own words. Then only you can take it as a material from different articles. And then you have to reference it. So you have to give the credit that you have taken this from this source, but you don't need to take it word to word. It has to be put in your own words.
Yes, so that's called paraphrasing. We call it paraphrasing. So we have the next question.
And the meaning should not change at all.
Yes, sir.
Whatever is being expressed by that author has to have the same meaning.
Has to be maintained. Yeah, it's how will the reviewer get to know fabricated and falsified data when reviewing?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because you have to use your entire judgment, and you need to review the literature on that particular aspect, and you need to use your analytical skills as to whether the the person who's the author is lying, or probably fabricating is making up the results. Sometimes you also need to go through the data sets. You need to review the data sets, which was probably done in that Lancet article. They tried to get the data sets, but they declined to give the data sets. So that the open access to that was not provided. Ma'am, would you like to add to any of that?
Something to share from my own experience. In my entire clinical experience of 25 years, I have seen 3-4 ameloblasttic carcinomas. And I got a report of 35 ameloblasttic carcinoma from a center which doesn't see many patients. So automatically I can realize that this is something which has been fabricated. Just to share.
So it's your experience actually that counts. So the next question is, if an author wants to publish 3 or 4 outcomes based on the same primary data set into 3 or 4 papers, as discussing everything in one paper may become lengthy. So should he approach the editor and discuss about it?
Yeah, this was discussed by Sachin sir yesterday very well. It's called the you're making a salami out of it. Basically, you're chopping off an entire bar into multiple parts, or you're trying to convert your single study into multiple smaller studies. So this was covered very well yesterday, and this is not ideally it's not ethical. You're not supposed to do that as per the ethics.
Yes. And how to write a scholarly book review? That's the next question.
Yeah, this scholarly book review also follows the same principles. You're not supposed to lift up, you just can't lift up chapters or articles or paragraphs in verbatim the same way that it is taken up like that. So you should it should be probably it has to be paraphrased, or it should be, or if you're quoting, as ma'am said, you'll have to give the references as such. Sometimes definitions and classifications cannot be changed, yet they have to be taken the same as it is. So that has to be quoted as in.
Yes. So the people are asking again that if one outcome of the study is published in one journal, and then you intend to publish the other outcome in some other journal based on the same primary data set, is it the obligation of the author to inform the editor that the results of the study are based on the same data set which has been published elsewhere?
I'm sorry, your audio just cracked a little bit.
Okay.
I'll try and read that. Yeah, that's.
Yeah, it's a long question. So
yeah, I'll just read that. In case of if he has published one outcome of the study in one journal and intends to publish the other outcome in some other journal based in the same primary data, same sample, is it the obligation of the author to inform the editor that the results of the present study are based on the same primary data published elsewhere? Ma'am, would you like to answer that?
Yes,
Because it's an
yeah,
editor level question.
yeah. So ideally, the author should write to the editor that part one has been published elsewhere. And now it's the editor may immediately write back to the author if you have published your part one in some journal. So try to publish as a continuation in the same journal. So don't try to divert into two different journals. So it should be coming as part one and part two in the same journal. Maybe next issue, but it should be the same journal.
okay. So what is the process for correct use of other researchers or books images? So how do we do credit for that? Give credit for that?
You have to take consent from the person who has designed that image or drawn that image or has image from his or her clinical scenario. So you have to take the consent and then you can duplicate it. Otherwise, you have to have your own.
Yeah, and I think you have to write, a disclaimer there that this permission has also already been taken from there's no copyright issue. Okay. The next question we have is, many researchers facing plagiarism in this section of literature review, what should be done to take care of?
Plagiarism is whenever we see more than 19% of plagiarism, immediately the journal manager sends the article back to the author to refine it. If it's marginal, maybe 30%, then the article comes to us and then we see what is the level of plagiarism. It is paragraphs copy pasted, or it's because of it's a review article. For review articles, because it is taken from about 150 200 articles, so we may allow a bit more of copy, because the words are going to be there anyhow. So but if it is a clinical article, more than 19% is straight away rejection.
Okay. The next question we have is, if the article is a suspected case of fabrication of data, how is this to be put forth to the author and editor by review?
It has to be disclosed that is the feeling of the editor or the reviewer, that looks a fabrication, because some points have actually raised that query that it is fabricated. So highlighting those points, it could be informed to the author that this is the feeling with the reviewers and the editor.
Yes.
So sometimes the data you can actually make out, as ma'am said, that the experience and the skill level of the reviewer is such that they can actually make out that the data is fabricated. That comes with experience. And if you are in doubt, then you can always request for the data sets to be provided.
Yep.
So you can go through the master charts and see for yourself. I think we have the liberty as a reviewers to do that. So that's an independent peer review process. So you can do that and highlight. Ma'am, anything to add to that?
Yeah. So in the same case where we found 35 ameloblasttic carcinoma, we didn't write much that it is not possible. We just asked for the slides of 35 specimens, and we didn't receive that.
Yes. So that's the way out. So you have to take.
You need to use. Yeah. You need to use.
Yeah. You have to respect your professional colleagues as well, and
yeah, you have to use smarter ways of getting out the data without offending anyone.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, you need to respect their sentiments as well. So that's very important.
We take up more questions.
I think we are getting late. We should start with the next, if the next presenter is here, and then otherwise we'll make the session
We'll get-
longer. Yeah.
Okay, so I invite Dr. Krishna Bhatt. She's assistant professor, AIMS, New Delhi.
So, hello everyone, and to take forward from Dr. Ashi's presentation, one repetitive theme that we saw was fair treatment of authors and role of trust in review. So, which means that as a reviewer, you should be fair to the authors, and readers want to see the something which is not cooked up, something which wherein there is no favoritism involved on editor's part or on the reviewer's part towards the author. So that is why, moving on to the second slide, ma'am. If we see the usual review process, then we can see where all the flaws were and where we are trying to improve in the modern era. So usually, whenever any author gives any submission for publication, it usually goes through 2 to 3 rounds at least of peer review, because the reviewers will say something, then the editor will decide whether those comments should be all sent to the author, or should they be filtered. Sometimes they have to be filtered, because sometimes see, there are some author prerogatives. You cannot sometimes the reviewers can think that question A is not right, and maybe the author should have done research not on this question but on that question. Now, choosing a research question is totally an author's prerogative. So in these kind of situations, when a reviewer makes a comment upon the research question or something like that, that is a time where editor jumps in and says that no, this is the prerogative of the author to decide the outcome parameters that they want to see. For example, if I'm publishing my data on mandibular fracture and I have seen only infection, and somebody asks me that why have you not written about anything about non-union, so non-union or malunion. So now that may be a valid question, but as an author, as a researcher, I have the prerogative to choose my research question. In this kind of situations, the editor has the option to filter out the reviewers' comments as well. So whenever there is a submission, the article goes through review process, then the editor, most of the times editor decides to pass on the reviewers' comments totally to the author, but many times they are filtered out also. And then the author gives either a rebuttal or a response or a correction in accordance to the reviewers' comments. And then it goes through the re-review process as well. So, so in this process, and now moving on to the third slide, ma'am. So let us see an example. Whenever an editor opens his or her dashboard, then he sees something like this, that these many new assignments or new submissions are there, and submission which require wherein reviews are complete, submissions where there are additional reviews are required because authors have submitted some comments and they need to be re-reviewed. So you see something like this. And next, ma'am. So, and then again, as you can see on the right hand side panel, the editor has the access to check the plagiarism, as we were talking. So there are checks about duplicate submission, there are checks about plagiarism, and you also sometimes the editor also has to sometimes think about the third reviewer, because the reviews have come back, but the reviewer number 1 has spoken too much highly of the submission, and reviewer 2 has spoken too much ill of the submission, as in too much negative comments and too much positive comments. Then in that case also a third reviewer is chosen. So moving on to the third slide, next slide, ma'am. So here, for example, we can see that the editor can see that this XYZ reviewer has done so and so number of reviews for the for the journal, or they have done so they have how many days on an average they have taken, and how many of tasks they have not completed in time. So this is the reviewers you can say biography kind of a thing, which is visible to the editor, not to the author, not to the readers for sure. Moving on to the next slide, ma'am. And then again, you can see this is probably an example of a third reviewer thing, wherein maybe the authors have responded to the queries by the reviewers, but the same reviewer is not chosen to judge the rebuttal by the authors. That time, the reviewer number 3 is chosen to independently judge, because sometimes the opinions may be so different between the author and the reviewer, but one of the reviewers may be in favor of the author. In that case, as a tiebreaker, a third person or third reviewer is brought into the picture. So, but then if we see this process, this is the usual process. If we see the usual process, where do you think is the catch? Because it was confidential, and wherever there is anything confidential, there is a chance to cook up. Coming back to Dr. Ashi's talk about fair treatment of authors and trust issues, trust is the ideal thing. But do you think we live in an ideal world? No. Many a times, there is actually a published research on this, that until recent years, most of the reviewers were from the developed countries and not from the developing countries. So, and then for impact factor also, we know that there is the editors send confidential phone calls or texts to the referees that ask the author to include XYZ publication from our journal. So what will this cause? This will cause more number of citations for that XYZ journal. So this is basically the journals used to try to buy impact factor by cooking up all these things. To reduce these things, we as a scientific community and the publishers also, they also felt that there has to be some kind of transparency. People should know that what talk happened between the time of submission of a manuscript and its publication. So what were the reviewers' comment, why it was rejected or why it was accepted. So this is where the transparency in reviewership comes into play. Moving on to next slide, ma'am. So here we have to see who all are involved in the publication process, and who a publication also, and also the statistics based on which we judge a journal, or as Dr. Ashi said, Lancet has an impact factor of about 58 or 59. So impact factor tells you something about about how useful is the journal, or how useful an average article from a journal is, and the same goes for authors also. So there are indices for authors like H index and I10 index and stuff like that. So that tells you how much useful a person or a journal talks. So who publishes this analysis? So there is this organization called Claribet Analytics, which is in turn um, a branch of Thomas Reuters publication, and likewise the elsewhere publications, they have their own set of analytic system like Scopus, and then there are different websites like Web of Science and Publons, and then there are softwares like ScholarOne. So these are three things. One are the publishing companies and their branches on scientific analytics, and then there are commercial websites like Publon and Web of Science, and then there are softwares. So all of these are involved, and then journals have to tie up with these people in order to get published, get access to the readership, and get themselves evaluated also in terms of impact factor and all. So this trend of bringing transparency in reviewership started about 10 years before. And we also have to understand that Publons was one of the first ones to start all this, and along with Embo Press. So, but then Embo Press has been now a partner of Wiley Press, and Publons has been incorporated or bought by the Thomson Reuters. So there is a lot of business and money involved also. We probably should, as people who are true to science, as people who are true to truth, I would say, because science is nothing but a quest for truth. We should also be aware of this money involved somewhere at the back of our head, maybe, so as to bring in actively. Why are we holding this workshop? Because we should all be on the same page as to how best we can bring in transparency in review process. Here, Publons and Web of Science, these people are the commercial website people. They have suggested something, and it's a very welcome or a kudos suggestion. But then in future, we as researchers have to lead the way. That is why the talk. Moving on to the next slide, ma'am. So currently what it proposes to include is that along with the manuscript, wherever you find any manuscript in any online version or a printed version of a journal, if that journal policy has accepted transparent peer review policy, then it will also have an attached file of peer review comments, so that the reader will get to know that what all stages an article has gone through before publication. That's number one. Number two, you will also see author responses or rebuttals to reviewers, and then editorial decision letters also you will see. Another very interesting thing is there'll be a link to Publon to access all these files, and that link also is citable. That means that, say for example, if you find in publication, in some XYZ publication, in the discussion or somewhere, something which came as a net result of the reviewers comments for that particular paper, and earlier it was something else, then maybe as a reviewer or as a author, you took lessons from it, and those lessons you can incorporate in your own article or your own review. So this entire review process is also citable, just like an article. This is a very interesting component of the entire edition of the feature. Moving on to next, ma'am. So what is edited out? Obviously, you what information you need, but there is something called confidentiality also. So wherever there is any talk about the patient figure or so third-party information which can have confidentiality issues. The talk may happen between the author and the reviewer. Maybe data may be shared and checked and rechecked, but maybe if it involves personal information or identity information of third party, then that will not be put to the readership. And then confidential comments to the editors by the reviewers, they will also not be included in this kind of files. This is the proposal at present. And then identity of the reviewer if they have opted out of the same. So for example, if I'm the reviewer and I get an invite to review an article, I will only be, and if, say for example, if the journal also accepts the transparent review policy, and if the author has also said yes, that I want, if my article is published, then I want all the review process to go online. In that case, as a reviewer, I don't have a choice but to agree with the thing that if the author says that I want to make my research transparent review, I have to go with it, or I just decline that I don't want to be a reviewer for this publication. But however, what choice do I have? I do have a choice that my comments may be made public, but not my name. My views may be made public, but I don't want to be identified that I did the review for this XYZ publication, because this is very important. Still, as I think we have not evolved into non-judgmental human beings, so probably this is why this feature has been kept, and that's good. So yeah, moving on to the next slide. So, and then this is a thing that which consent is taken from which party. So authors get a choice to make the review process public. First and foremost, the journal should have the policy, and then authors get a choice whether they want to make the review process public or not. If these people say yes, then the reviewer gets a choice whether their identity be revealed or not. But their remarks will definitely be revealed. That is there. And then any reviews from submission to other journals. For example, this whatever publication we are talking about, it has gone through 2-3 rejections in previous journals, so those journals, if they are following this transparent review policy, and if those journals choose to share the review process file with the current publisher or the current journal house, in that case, they will be made public. But if say for example both are from different publishing houses, like elsewhere has a plethora of journals, elsewhere is a publishing organization, it has plethora of journals under its umbrella. Likewise, there'll be another publishing house which will have plethora of journals under its umbrella. So if there is a publishing house change, or if there is a journal change, and in that, if any previous party did not follow transparent review process, then those files, those review files probably will not be covered. Moving on to the next slide, ma'am. So what are the benefits? This is a very welcome change that I've already said, because this brings in reproducibility. I remember that when I was in my residency, one of my friends used to ask me that, do you get to review any articles? Because I also get, and I really don't know how to review them. So if you can provide an example. But just as Dr. Ashi has said, that should you be sharing it on WhatsApp? No, it's part of the ethics that unless and until that article has been published, you cannot share. Even if you have got it as a reviewer, you cannot share it with your friends. But then at the same time, there was growing need of the budding reviewers and budding authors as to learn from others. So this brings in reproducibility. You read others reviews, and then you learn as to what kind of mistakes can I avoid from seeing other authors work, or how can I review seeing other reviewers work. And then it gives recognition to the reviewers. Many a times in job interviews, otherwise who will want to do a review? It doesn't give you any money, it doesn't give you any name. Why should you do it? So there is a growing need to get recognition to the reviewers also. And then it is projected to stop fraudulent reviews and favoritism also. So coming on to next, ma'am. However, as I said, this faith and trust, they are two very catchy words. So if we and this initiative, although welcome, it has been from the commercial people. So we as researchers own the onus as to make the system foolproof, make the system even better. So food for thought I want all of you to have is that just as negative results are also published in any research, what about articles that are rejected? Are we going to publish their review process also? I mean, these Thomson Reuters and these publishing houses, they only have taught us researchers that and all the negative results also should be published, right? You should not be talking only about your successes, but also about your failures. Or failures can be complications. Failures can be lack of success in treatment. So, and they make us write everything. So likewise, what about articles that get rejected? Are we going to make their review process also public? I guess yes. This answer to this question should be yes. And then even for the positive review process or successful publications, the choice is made by the authors. So should it be made compulsory? For a startup, they have made it a choice wala thing. But should it be continued as such? Because this is a very welcome change, and why not? Why not everyone? Then again, there was talk about legal actions against authors who are doing fraudulent thing, and we are resorting to smarter ways of name and shame in general public and stuff. But if this thing is made public for everyone, then probably the chances of authors making cooked up publications will be much less, because they know that if any reviewer points out, then everything is going to go public. So that also is something which we all as a scientific community need to give a clear thinking about. And then should there be new indices for journals credibility based on how many negative reviews or rejections are cited for further research? Just as moving on to the next slide, please. Just as we saw the current famous example of the Lancet, and now there is NEJM also has joined the same trend. Lancet article was published and then retracted, and NEJM, the same authors, Mr. Mehra and Mr. Desai, so their published article was retracted from Lancet, and their submitted article was retracted from NEJM. On HCQ use in corona. So just as because of cooked up data or lack of providing data to a third party reviewer, it had to be retracted. Likewise, there are many positive innovations in medical science which are not published, maybe because of some kind of bias, maybe, or maybe because there is truth in it but there is no gain in it. There is something called orphan drug. So many a times if the company does not see any gain, then also that kind of drugs, they are not promoted. And there is a fear, I would, because there is no evidence, I cannot claim, but I would say there is a fear that many useful information is not being made out in public. So so then we are seeing impact factor as to how much of this any XYZ article from a journal has been cited, that we are using as to measure a success of a journal. But are we seeing how much of useful or possible scientific innovations this particular journal has suppressed? Are we looking into that? So this Publon thing, or this transparency in review thing, the small initiative, it will have a very long-term implications and very long-term offshoots in coming years if we promote this, and this will all be beneficial to the scientific curiosity in general. So with this, I will like to conclude my talk. And thank you very much, all of you. It's the beginning of the change, and very many brainstorming sessions will be required. One will not be enough, for sure.
Thank you, Dr. Krishna.
Pleasure.
Very informative session. So we have a few questions. I think they are overlapping between the two sessions. So either Dr. Rashi or you or Divya ma'am can take over. So the first question which we missed was regarding the discussion part of the manuscript. When we quote different authors, what care should we take?
Okay.
Okay.
So while you are writing as a reviewer, when you are writing a comment on the discussion, you have to first of all see that what the story began. The discussion is towards that story. There is a flow in the story. So it should be a wide discussion on the focused objective, and you have to see whether the recent work has been discussed or not. So you have to see all those things, and we will come up with a checklist for all individual topics to you, so that you know that this is the checklist. You have to check all these items in the discussion, all this in the methodology, all this in the conclusion, and so on. So we'll be providing you with a checklist. Any other question? Yeah.
Yeah. So we have, can we easily and ethically get rid of plagiarism just by framing the sentence in some other way?
Yes. It doesn't mean that you make the active to passive or passive to active, but really you need to that comes to we can see that whatever change you have done, we can see. So if as an editor or as a reviewer, I am seeing the plaque check report and I see that in this line majority of the words are the same, so I can make out that this is reframed or paraphrasing. Yeah.
Passive.
So if the entire article is this way, that means you have not written anything. You have just changed the sentences and you have got your article done. So that brings a bad reputation.
Actually, even doing, ma'am, to adding to that, to do that requires some kind of skill and practice as well. It comes with time, because most of us, whether we like it or not, we are used to cut, copying, and pasting. We all do it. I mean, since things have become so strict, we are actually looking back and trying to assess whether what we have been doing is correct or not.
Recently, there was a plaque check report, and many of the articles were withdrawn, and very big names were in that list. And what had been done was there were images which were plagiarized. So not only the text, but the images also you have to prove. You have to have your own. So that is very important.
Right.
Yes. So in that context, we have a comment from Dr. Anshula that for images and illustration, both permission from authors and citing the source is required. It's very true, ma'am. You have to cite the source as well, as we discussed. You have to take permission plus cite. And another question is, can a head of print article be put in references?
Yes.
Yes,
If it is online, yes.
If it's online, okay. And what are the tips for data checking while reviewing?
The checklist will be providing. So all that will be there.
So I think that's all. We covered almost all the questions.
There's another thing which I'd like to add. there's something called a preprint version of submitted papers. So there are websites called arxiv.org, in which you can actually put in a preprint version of your paper, and it shows it shows up in Google Scholar, and it shows up in other indexing sites. But that is something which can be done even within the preprint stage,
Yeah,
so that people are aware of the kind of
now people are actually not waiting for the print to happen. So when the
Yeah.
articles are ready, approved, within a week they are in the respective journal, in press, shown as in press, and they can be cited anywhere.
Yeah, so basically the preprint can also be, something which is in press is also there. But before that, even if you want something to be shown in the internet, so that alerts everyone else that this is the kind of, research that you're conducting. So that is also nowadays in.
So there's a request, ma'am, to please give a word of advice for reviewing articles.
There is an entire session by Dr. Sandeep Kumar on Monday, I suppose. So you will get to hear from him the words of wisdom, and I think we should wait till then.
So we have the poll results, Dr. Ankita. Okay. So we have 57 responses. Okay, so the first question was, reviewers are expected to. So 73% of the reviewers said we expected to review ethically and professionally. And we have got no answer for detecting plagiarism. Yes, very true. Detect fraud. No, we are not here to detect fraud, but yes, we can point out to. And to detect any scientific or professional misconduct. Yes. So I think the correct answer, as indicated here, is review ethically and professionally. That is the prime responsibility of any reviewer. So the next question, how much time is required by a reviewer to ideally review an article? So we have responses to this. So, okay. So 49% of the people say minimum 4 hours. That was discussed in the session, I think. Yes.
Yeah, I would like
And
to add on here. It's not necessary that you need to invest all 4 hours in that same go. You may read it once, think about it, mark the areas, reread again next day, reread in next day. So you may do it in 3-4 days. It's not necessary that you go entire process in the same day.
so a protected time of 4
Yeah, I
hours.
think the audio had gone at that time. What I said was, some journals want a response within 48 hours, and some give you up to 2 to 3 weeks to give the reply. So you have to adjust your time accordingly. Whether if it is a 2 day time period, so you have to adjust those 4 hours within those 2 days.
Yeah.
Mostly people try to do it as soon as possible, but that's not doing justice to the manuscript. Right.
Okay. So next question was, ethics is the primary responsibility of. So yes, we discussed this also. So it's primarily the responsibility of the author. Although we share it together collectively, but primarily it's the responsibility of the author. The standard ethical guidelines for peer reviewers to follow are called. So 62% of the say COPE guidelines, and that is the right answer. Penalties for authors who indulge in misconduct does not include which one of the following? So 57.9% have given this answer as legal action. So yes. So this was the poll results of today. So anything, ma'am, you would like to add on this?
No, it's fine. Yeah.
So I thank all the participants and all the speakers, and the participants will be getting a link for the feedback for today's sessions as well. And you may continue to support us by giving your suggestions and the aha moments in the feedback, so we improve on subsequently.
Yes, and maybe you have been circulated an article wherein you need to make your review comments. So we want you to have your comments, and then we'll circulate you the checklist. So we are waiting for you to respond to the comments, for the articles circulated among you.
Okay. So I think most of you have got, everybody has got the link, so we'll be working on it till we meet again.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks a
Thank
lot,
you once
everyone.
again.
Thank you, ma'am.